Hello friends, are you ready for the most important UFO video you've ever seen? Well, buckle up, this is a wild one. So I do believe that most of the UFOs that we see are actually bodies, very similar to the human body, but designed for interstellar and interdimensional travel, as opposed to the human body, which is designed for earthly travel. But like the human body, they are made specifically for a particular consciousness, for that non-physical consciousness to inhabit that physical craft to do things that the non-physical consciousness can't normally do. Okay, now let's look at this through the soul sync lens, that our physical body, our physical avatar, is a vehicle for our non-physical consciousness to enter into, to traverse this physical world here. We have our five senses, and it's like a VR headset for our soul. Our consciousness jacks into this body, and it can come down here and have this amazing physical experience in this physical world. It couldn't do that without this physical body. It could exist disembodied, which would appear as a glowing light orb, and we do see those, but those can't have the same experience as a physical body. They can't know love. They can't know hurt. They can't know what it's like to eat chocolate or to walk on a beach. They can't do these things. That's why you come into the physical body to have this very particular physical experience. But this physical body is just a vehicle that is made for consciousness. Okay, now let's look at these UFO. What do we see? We see craft that are explained by experiencers and insiders as being organic, as being sentient, and at least semi-conscious, and needing a consciousness to act as the pilot. It's very similar to the human body. The human body has a level of sentience and awareness and even a spectrum of consciousness. It can exist on its own. When you go into an out-of-body state, the body still goes on. But it needs that higher self, that higher connected consciousness that's connected to source, to really animate it and bring it to life. That's what the higher self mixed with the human self, that synchronization, is what I call soul sync. I talk at length about that. So that same framework there, we're going to apply that to UFOs. So say you are a consciousness and you want to traverse the cosmos, right? Go in between all the physical worlds and between the non-physical dimensions. How would you do that? Well, you wouldn't build a physical craft. That doesn't make any sense. Like, you wouldn't just go into a factory and make a UFO, because that UFO might work fine in the physical matter reality that you build it in, but once you leave that bubble, everything changes. The laws of physics, laws of nature are different throughout the universe, and especially when you go from physical to non-physical. So you would need a type of a craft that can change and morph and evolve with the surroundings that it's in. This is what we see with UFOs. When people see them from a distance, they say they look metallic, silvery, right? And then when they see them up close, this has been reported by many experiencers, they seem organic. Sometimes they even say that they seem to be in pain, or they seem to be sad. They have feeling and emotion. When they touch them, they say it feels more like a dolphin than, metallic. And a lot of like insects and fish and stuff like that have this sort of kind of almost like metallic looking armor plating, but they're not metallic, they're organic. And that's what these craft seem to be like. And when people go into the craft, they say it's more like dreamlike. When you're in the craft, the inside's different than the outside. Like, the craft on the outside might be 30 or 40 feet, and then you get inside and it's like the size of a football field, and there's, endless hallways and all sorts of things that don't make any sense. Time dilation, and there's no, edges. There's no, everything is very organic and molded. It looks like it was like grown, not assembled. And they talk about how when you're inside these things, everything, there's like a knowing, and you speak telepathically, and things change with your consciousness. Well, if you think about the inside of a being as opposed to the outside, like, look at me, okay? I'm just a normal sized dude. I'm 5'10", a buck 70, something like that. And if you were to go inside me, right? Don't make this dirty, but if you were to go inside me, the inside of me is like a universe, right? Think about, there's trillions of cells and all the different synapses and neurons firing and all the electrical waves going through my body and all the stuff happening inside every body. There's like a universe inside your body. So the inside of you is way different than the outside of you. The inside of you is like a universe. The outside of you just looks like a regular being. Well, look at these vehicles, these craft. When people go inside of them, they say it's completely different on the inside than the outside. That's exactly what you would see if it was a biological craft that was made in the same way that our biological body's made, as a vehicle for consciousness. Okay, let's take it a step further. People report seeing grays on these craft, and the grays seem to be these like automatons piloting the craft. And then there's like a lot of times the craft will go back up to a larger craft where there will be like Nordic beings or mantis beings that seem to be over in the hierarchy above the grays. And in this case, what it seems like is happening is the grays are like a drone, like an artificial surrogate pilot for these craft. So if you imagine the craft is made for a specific consciousness, the same way our body, your body is made for your consciousness, right? There's a link there, a synchronization there. They're made for each other, like a lock and a key. Well, if these craft are made in the same way, where a craft is made for a specific consciousness, but then somebody else wants to pilot that craft, that's not that original consciousness, maybe you use a gray as like a surrogate, as a stand-in drone pilot. And that's what it seems like these things are doing. It seems like beings like the mantis and the Nordics use the grays as little drones, and those grays can actually pilot these craft. Okay, now that's all fine and dandy. Are you following me? Because it gets even weirder. Okay, so now we have something called these psionic teams, and these, like Skywatcher and Jake Barber and his crew, and they're doing these things where they are like summoning these craft, right? They're basically like getting a meditative state, and they're using like focused intention to make contact with these craft and actually like bring them down, which is pretty unethical, and I don't know why they would do that, but this is what they're doing. And it's one thing to make contact and like say, hi, Flash, if you hear me, oh, that was nice, love you, right? And that's what we do. But to like actually try to crash these things, whatever, it's another video. But how can my theory of these UFOs explain what they're doing? Well, it actually makes a lot of sense, because if you think about it this way, these craft are not made like in a factory, like in this materialist mindset, like we like to, clump everything into. It's different. So if these craft exist in this sort of meta material, format where they're not really physical and they're not non-physical, kind of like our body. If you think about it, we like to think of ourselves as physical, but then when you drill down into the atomic level of a human or of anything, it just turns into like vortices of energy and probability distribution fields. There's not really any physical matter there. So we're physical and non-physical too. But these craft are very physical and non-physical because they have a deeper understanding of how the universe works, and they can morph from physical to non-physical. So when they're in, like, say, our atmosphere, or they're observing our planet or doing what they're doing, and then our psionics guys make contact with them and pull them in with their Jedi mind tricks, and then summon them down and actually pull them down into the density of our physical world, well, then our laws of nature and our laws of physics, the rule sets that govern this physical matter reality here, start applying to these metaphysical craft. And then they're sort of spontaneously 3D printed into our reality. They become fully material, and that's not what they're designed to do, and that's why they crash. And that's why when we find them, they don't make any sense. Like they find these things, they're like, all right, let's reverse engineer it and make weapons, dude. Wouldn't that be awesome? And then they can't. They sit, put these things in hangars for freaking 80 years, and they still have no freaking clue what they're doing, because they're looking at this thing all wrong. These aren't physical craft that were made in some physical factory on some planet in Zeta Reticuli and flew here. That's an insane way to think about reality. So when they're bringing these things down into the thickness and density of our reality, they're not made for that. They materialize, and they can't take the density, they can't take the heat and everything. That this place is not what they're made for. So they crash, or they morph into some anomalous shape or some egg type shape or something like that, and they just crash, and then we pick them up. We don't know what to do with them. But I think that we're looking at UFOs all wrong, obviously, because, 100 years on and we have no idea what we're talking about. So we need to look at it more the same way the human body is a vehicle for consciousness. It's a vessel for consciousness. I think these craft are vessels and vehicles for consciousness as well. But instead of making like the human body specifically for this planet, where, we can climb trees and walk on beaches, like we're made pretty well, suited for this planet for the most part, these craft are made for a completely different purpose, to travel the cosmos, travel time, travel dimensions, and to do it with a consciousness as the pilot. And I think the question we need to be asking is not where these craft come from, but where is the host consciousness? Because that host consciousness is piloting these craft. I have my theories. I would like to know yours. Let me know in the comments below. Have a beautiful day. Peace.